Hey, it's Eleanor, the host of this podcast. So at the beginning of 2021, I set an intention for myself. And the intention was that I was going to do my darndest to move through 2021 in a state of relaxed confidence. And I chose the state relaxed confidence because I really feel that when I'm in a state of relaxed confidence, I perform best, I enjoy my life the most, and quite honestly, I'm healthy. I'm healthiest when I'm in that state, and I'm a much better boss, much better colleague, much better friend, mother, wife, all those things. So I'm happy to report that I've been doing pretty well against that intention. And so what I decided to do with this podcast episode is share 7 tips that have worked really well for me, that I hope work well for you, to be a CEO capable of running a very chill 7-figure business. All right, let's dive in. Don't go anywhere. So here's the question. In a world where the rules of business have been written by men, how do women entrepreneurs like us, women who want to make millions of dollars and impact millions of lives, how do we create enormous success on our terms? That's the question, and this show explores the answers. Welcome to Power Presence Position. I'm your host, Eleanor Beaton, and I'm on a mission to double the number of women entrepreneurs who generate over $1 million per year in annual revenue. I'm an award-winning entrepreneur, author, and leadership coach. I'm a wife, mom of 2 boys, and I'm the CEO of a 7-figure business. Stick around because on this show, you'll learn how to think, communicate, and get paid like a 7-figure CEO. Let's go. So, in addition to 2021 being a pretty good year so far, what makes it an even better year is that Beyonce turns 40. Yes, I'm recording this podcast in August. September 4th, I believe, is Queen Bee's birthday. One of my faves, Lainey Gossip, keeps calling it Beyonce's Ruby Jubilee. And Harper's Bazaar this month came out with a big feature on Beyonce. And like most of the features, Beyonce basically doesn't give interviews anymore. And she doesn't even really submit to having articles written about her. Like the journalist has to submit the questions and then Beyonce will write her own answers. And that's just so boss. I love it. She's totally taking control of the narrative. Anywho, so the question was, you're turning 40. Tell us about what you've learned so far in your life. And what Beyonce did was basically kind of break her life up into decades and talk through what she's learned at every single part of her journey. And she talked about, how earlier in her life, in her sort of teens and 20s, it was all about working hard, making a lot of sacrifices, putting some pressure on herself for sure, paying her dues, like putting in the work, showing up, doing what she quote unquote needed to do to get herself to this place where she is today, where she has incredible independence, So she talked about the whole sort of working hard, putting pressure on herself, hustling, all of that. And then she talked about how into her 30s, her life became much more about enjoying what she's created. She said she's worked so hard for so long that she feels she's no longer in this place where she needs to compete with herself. She trusts herself completely, and she's really here to uplift others and to enjoy the life she's built. And when I read that, I could relate so much to what Beyonce was talking about. And it's certainly something that I see in you guys, when we're talking and in my clients and my friends and colleagues. I think for women, especially as we get into our 30s and 40s and 50s, by that time, I think it's happened already, but it's this idea of making a transition and a shift to a state of being where we understand we need to work hard, but we want to be happy. We want to be chill. And I have absolutely felt this transition in recent years to a place where I'm still ambitious as hell, I have really big and expansive dreams. And I also am committed to achieving them in the state of relaxed confidence. So I made the commitment with my New Year's resolution. It's not really a resolution. It was more of an intention. I made that sort of formally to myself in 2021. But the reality is throughout 2020, this was something that started throughout 2020 as I began to be disillusioned with this idea of growth at all costs and really seeing that I wanted to continue growing my company, growing my impact, seeing what I was capable of. And I wanted to do it in a way that was actually nourishing to myself and promoted well-being. So that was kind of the challenge that I set for myself. And, and the way that I'm measuring my results are, am I growing across the measures that are important to me? And I'll share what those measures are in a moment. The answer is yes. And am I mostly able to stay in a state of relaxed confidence? And the answer to that is yes. So I wanted to, we've got so many examples out there of how to really hustle your way to the top. I think about, and mostly it's guys, but there are some women in there too. I think about somebody like a Gary Vaynerchuk, just energy guy, adrenaline guy, tons of energy, loves the grind, and I like Gary V, to be honest. I think he makes a lot of great points, but he's an example of the hustle entrepreneur and hustle culture, right? I really wanted to set an example and kind of take you behind the scenes of my life and how I do things a little bit to give you an example of how to run a chill 7-figure business, And honestly, anybody who knows me, and I will say also too, the clients that we work with, it's a big cultural value that we have, this idea of growing profitably, like making a lot of money and a big impact in a very chill, expansive way. So I'm going to give you 7 tips on how I do that and how we do that. And that's what I'm going to do in this podcast. So let's dive in. All right. So my tip number 1 is to take the mental strain of leadership seriously. So this is interesting. The brain is about 2% of your total body weight, but it consumes about 20% of your energy. And research suggests that deep, strenuous cognitive work, i.e., where you're sort of straining your brain, causes the brain to burn even more energy. And I didn't take account for this earlier in my career as an entrepreneur. I didn't take into account the fact that even though I was sitting at my desk thinking, planning, handling, putting out fires, preventing other fires, making plans so that I could be, proactive rather than reactive, managing people, managing expectations, dealing with challenges, growing and really acclimatizing to new levels of success, I didn't realize or take into account the mental strain that can put on a person and how that is every bit as strenuous as literally as running a marathon. And maybe that's unfair because I haven't run a marathon myself personally, but you get the analogy that leading is strenuous. And in our culture, we don't talk about that very much. I mean, leading is we just kind of think of it as any other activity. But I will tell you that the act of making something out of nothing, and that is the act of building a business, of being an entrepreneurial CEO. So the act of making something out of nothing, the act of creating a path where there's no path, the act of making mistakes, taking risks, putting yourself out there, taking chances, making mistakes, raising the bar, surprising yourself with how successful something was, all of that creates a mental strain. And that mental strain requires rest and nourishment. And I think a lot of times we talk about burnout, and so we think we have to do all these extreme things to recover from the burnout. And sometimes you do if it's been going on long enough. But what I have found is just really staying present to the fact that, hey, Eleanor, building and leading and growing the kind of business and the size of business that you have, it's a cognitive strain. And so you have to build in time to relax, to deeply nourish yourself. And that's everything from food to getting more than enough support around the home, to getting more than enough support in the business itself, lots of sleep, lots of sort of nourishing and pampering. Those kinds of things are hugely important. So that's really my tip number one, taking the mental strain of leadership seriously. And when you do that, when you fill up the well, like you guys, you need to fill the well way more than somebody who is not leading a business, a 7-8 figure business, or a business that's 6 figures, or you're trying to be 6 figures, you're starting it up. Don't underestimate just how much more gas you need to put in the tank than somebody who's not doing that. You know, it's legit. It's a big mental strain. The buck always stops with you. You are, to a degree, you're always on in a way that if you're not a business owner, you just don't have to be, you know, like yes, we take vacations. It's harder for us to really turn off because we have a lot of responsibility. So I'm going to say that's my first tip. Take the mental strain of leadership seriously and make sure you are getting more than enough support and really focusing on replenishing the tanks daily, weekly, monthly with things that really nourish you. So that's my first tip. Okay, so if we're talking about filling the tank, I think it's really important that you set up your business to do that. So my second tip is to be very mindful about what you measure in your business and set up your business so that the growth of your business itself is able to replenish you. So let me kind of take a deep dive into what I'm talking about. So back in the day when I started my first business, and it was a boutique communications consulting agency. And so basically I had very high level clients who had complicated or tricky communications issues and things that required very highly talented, sophisticated service providers to fulfill those contracts, right? Every single contract that I fulfilled through that business was like that. Therefore, ergo, the business was so sophisticated and high touch that basically it was on me to fulfill like 90% of the contracts. That's how I positioned the business. That's how it was. It was that I had to fulfill everything. And it was really, really tiring. And that business burned me out so bad. I remember feeling like lying in a bed in Montreal, feeling like I was going to die from pneumonia. It was bad. And I don't know if you've ever had pneumonia, but it's awful. It feels like you're drowning. And I was there alone. A contract that I was working on was going totally sideways. I felt so alone. My husband and my 2 young sons were hundreds of miles away. I just will never forget that feeling. And I had really set up a business that the more that business grew, the more it took from me. And a lot of you guys are continuing to run businesses like that. And honestly, like, it's not your fault. Just like that wasn't my fault. That was how I thought it was supposed to work. And I have learned that, and this lesson, I have tried to disprove it, but I just continue proving it to myself over and over. If your business takes from you and you in any way value your well-being, you will not scale that business because you don't actually want to. Right? So the initial communications consulting agency that I had, I didn't really want to scale it because why would I? More money would just mean more stress and headaches and work for me. So I got it to a certain level and that's where it stayed. So flash forward to the business that I have today. and Safi Media with my incredible colleagues. We're on a mission to double the number of women entrepreneurs who scale past $1 million in annual revenues through entrepreneurship, education, business coaching, and storytelling. So when I set up this business, I knew that I was not going to repeat the mistakes of the past. And so I was really careful and mindful, and didn't happen overnight, right? I was really careful and mindful to make sure that I was setting this business up so that I would welcome growth, so that I could generate more money and have greater impact, and also at the same time be able to have more time and freedom. So the business growth, as the business grows, I actually get more freedom. So that's just really critical, and it's subtle, right? But this is where this concept of the jewel business comes from. So a jewel business is a company that is intentionally designed to offer 30% or more year-over-year growth. So 30% or more profits and 30% or more open time. That's the metric. Now, this is so interesting, guys. Stay with me here. I've never actually, since I really created the business this way, we've never actually grown 30%. We've grown much more than that year over year. However, I am much more chill because the business itself is set up to grow with ease. It's because we're growing through assets, not through my hustle. If only I can do it, we don't do it. That's the rule. If only I can do something, we don't do it. Whereas in my consulting business, if only I could do it, like that was my entire damn business, right? So the jewel business is really powerful. And what's so powerful about it is that when you transition from there's never enough, you have to hustle to grow more, to creating a business where you're just giving yourself some space to win. You know, when I legit set a 30% growth target, you can just bust that. Like your business can be doubling. And this is so interesting. Like back in the day, if my business doubled, I would still feel kind of disappointed because it was never enough. I know it sounds ridiculous, but it was like more of a relief. Now, as we grow the company steadily, you know, just consistently and steadily, because I've set this target, I'm building a jewel business. Like I'm going to eat my own dog food here, you know, because we've set these targets, the experience of growth I feel so happy every time we soar past the targets that I've set, you know, and we're an established company by now, right? So anyway, I just sort of put that out there, that really being mindful about what you measure and really watching for all the places where you're really buying into the lie that more is always better and that there's never enough, and how that can really trap you. So everything that you do achieve becomes more of a state of relief than of the feeling of just, wow, of true satisfaction, deep satisfaction, right? So that's kind of the second thing that I'd love to offer you. It's setting really high expectations for yourself and sort of buying into the status and culture of doubling, tripling, quadrupling growth year over year over year. And then you get there and you're unhappy. I can remember talking to a client who had grown her business by 67% and she was disappointed in her results. And I was like, girlfriend, you've got to give your head a shake there, because that is not sustainable. And on the other hand, I could so empathize because I've been there, and it takes enormous discipline to take a stand for yourself, to take a stand for chill growth. And again, it's also like, it's kind of like the meditation thing where the Buddhist monks are like, don't meditate because you want to be a better person, meditate in and of itself. And I agree, don't build a jewel business because you are listening to what I'm saying and you're like, I can go for 30%, but the reality is I'm probably going to double. And, you know, that's probably true if you do it right, because your whole attitude about growth, your whole energy around growth changes, and it becomes a much easier experience. So you're still working, there's still some pain, but there's just not suffering, and the entire thing feels a lot easier. So very long-winded way to say, be mindful about what you measure, rewire your metrics. And I really strongly encourage you to build a jewel business, to really focus on that. There's just so many benefits to 30% growth, 30% or more growth year over year, 30% profits, and 30% open time. And PS, if you want to learn more about a jewel business, go to episode 444, aptly titled, What is a Jewel Business? All right, so tip number 3, and this is very materially related to building a jewel business, is to price for profit. If you're not charging enough, you don't have the fuel to grow the business, and so the fuel must become your hustle. So a lot of the reasons why you can get really stressed out building your business is that you don't have fuel. So in Silicon Valley's startup tech world, their founders, they go out and get money because they're pre-revenue. They go out and get investors to give them the money to go through startup. The kinds of businesses that most of us are building, we don't do that. We have to cash flow. We're bootstrapping. And I think, by the way, that there's a lot of benefits to bootstrapping, i.e. learning how to sell, not wasting a lot of capital. And of course, there's some businesses where they couldn't bootstrap. They have to, they need to make big investments in order to create a business that can grow. But for the types of businesses that most of us are building, we are bootstrapping those businesses. We are generating cash, and ideally we're generating cash through selling, through sales. And I really see women struggling when they underprice. Because when you underprice, you are barely covering your bills. You can pay yourself, you can pay your bills. There's not a lot of money left over, so you have to hustle again next month. And so what's the fuel that's growing the business? There's no cash left over, so the fuel becomes your time and energy. And that is not sustainable, right? You can do that for a couple years, but you can't do it over the long term. And so, I can remember when Leon came on, that's my husband, by the way, he's our director of finance. And when he came on and we started really working together, he brought this energy of much greater attention to detail around pricing. And my tendencies were to add things and just throw them in. And he was like, Eleanor, everything that you add, there needs to be a charge for it. Because otherwise, everybody is working harder to deliver the same thing at the same price, and then it becomes your time and your energy that's sort of paying for that cost. And it sounds so basic and elementary, but he was totally right. And we actually had a lot of arguments about this. I really felt that he was curtailing me. I felt like he didn't understand. I felt like I told myself and then told him quite eloquently, as you could imagine from a podcast host, that he just didn't understand the client experience, blah, blah, blah. But the reality is that I was working myself to the bone, throwing in everything in the sun, wanting people to be grateful, but just basically as soon as you create a bar, that's the expectation, right? Now, all you're doing is just filling the expectation, PS, that you have set as the company owner. So I really had to learn to value what we offered on a whole new level and price for sustainability, right? A lot of you guys are so worried about your clients affording you that you are not asking yourself, can you afford yourself? And most of you can't. And so you're running into a deficit, and the deficit is your time and energy you're burning out, right? And you're burning out your team. Because that's the other thing. On our team, my thing is really clear. I want people working at 85% capacity. I want them to have a little bit of excess capacity because I think that's healthy. And it allows us, if we go through a phase, like a week or two where it's really busy, I'm okay with that because I know we're at 85% capacity. If everybody's at 100 capacity, there's no room. There's no wiggle room. So we're super clear about that. It's also why we offer 6 weeks of vacation. Like, I don't want people full out. I want people full out at 85%. There's like wiggle room and flexibility and fluidity. That's the kind of business I want to create and set and model in the world. So really, really price for profit, because when you have profit, when you have margin, that gives you options, right? It gives you options. It'll tell you like, I take having cash reserves very seriously. And the bigger the cash reserve, just the more peace of mind and the more chill you can be. And in my opinion, that makes me a better leader. It just, as my stress levels are way, way down, it just allows me to be just a more effective human, and a happier human, and allows me to stay in that state of relaxed confidence. So that's tip number 3, price for profit. Okay, so my tip number 4 for running a chill 7-figure business, this one sounds a little funny, but bear with me. It's to build a world and then invite people into your world, not the other way around. So again, let me go back to the consulting business that I used to run. In that business, it was all about what the client wanted, how the client wanted it, when the client wanted it. Like, I was this journeywoman who would go into my client's world, do a project, and then go back out. My whole business involved me being a quote unquote visitor in my clients' worlds. It was what they wanted. The projects were to their specifications. It was on their timeline. It was according to their budget a lot of the time. It was how they wanted to do their approvals processes. And of course, I had boundaries and I did the best that I could, but my entire consulting business was set up in their world. And so when you're in somebody else's world, you follow the rules and laws of that world, even if those rules and laws aren't your laws. They're not the ones that you would normally choose, right? That's just how it is. That's how society functions, right? So if you are from, if you're from Bulgaria and you have certain laws and norms that are followed in Bulgaria, and then you come to Canada, you're not following Bulgarian laws in Canada. You're subject to Canadian laws, right? And so that's just kind of how it works. And a lot of you guys and myself have businesses that are set up in that way. You're always visiting in somebody else's world. And I really see that as a tremendous source of burnout, right? And there's all kinds of people who try to help you be a stronger negotiator and a stronger communicator to impose your will. But here's the thing. I know some brilliant Bulgarians, but they can't come into another country and impose their will because of the laws of that country, right? It's set up, they're established. And so that's ultimately what I experienced as a consultant. I was always in other people's worlds, always following their laws, their timelines, their pricing structures, what they wanted, how they wanted it. And being a consultant is all about doing that really, really well, very often, And I know not every consultant has this experience, but I would say many, many people have that experience and even when I started my coaching business, I can remember initially, I was always worried that people wouldn't pay me what I wanted to be paid. I worried about what they would think about what I was saying. I worried if I had my classes at certain times, if they would come. And then this switch happened and I realized, Eleanor, when are you going to stop asking permission to be and serve in someone else's world? Why don't you just create your own world? And I had confidence in what I did. I had confidence in myself, but even more than that, I was completely fucking fed up of being in other people's worlds, and trust. I have always loved and respected my clients. It wasn't about not wanting to be in their world. I was just in order to do what I do and to continue growing and scaling, this business needs to be built in a way that suits my preferences. And for a woman to do that is kind of taking a stand for yourself, and so that's what I did. And I'll give you examples. When back in the day when we had live events, we didn't start before 10 a.m. Why? Because I don't like to rush in the mornings. And so some people, they were used to events start at 8:30. No, not on my watch. They don't. They start at 10, right? So I would do things like that, just really creating, and there's all kinds of different ways in terms of your policies, in terms of your pricing, in terms of how you sell and how you make offers. There's so many different ways, but I just stopped orienting my business to be somebody else's world, I started really focusing on making the world that I'm creating as gorgeous and yummy and inviting and compelling, but always making sure that the business is set up to allow me and my team to function at our best. And then inviting people to come and be a part of it, and clearly communicating our sort of mores and customs so that they know they're welcome here, but it's just a clear, orderly, well-communicated world, right? So that's my tip number 4, a bit more of a sophisticated one. And I will say that this one is huge, and this is our culture. So when you come and work with me and my team and our programs, the Power Presence Position Business Accelerator and the Incubator, it is all geared around this. Because what I have found is when you really understand that you're building a world and you take that seriously, so many of these other problems go away because, you just stop, the whole paradigm shifts, And so anyway, that's the work that we do. So I really strongly encourage you to go check out powerpresenceposition.com. Go check that out because that's the foundational place. We have women who are doing multiple 6 figures in that program. It's not about revenue, right? It's about altering the business to function in this way. And that's how you create a business that is sustainable and can scale, okay, without burning you out. So that's my tip number 4. Tip number 5 is to slow down on the inside in order to grow faster on the outside. What do I mean by that? I started, in order to to be a chill 7-figure entrepreneur, you kind of need to really pay attention to all the ways in which you try to speed things up internally. So what would happen? Here's what would happen. My business would start growing and I'd start getting sort of this state of adrenaline. And then that adrenaline would speed me up in the inside and I would start forcing things, trying harder, and that would burn me out. And then I'd get burnt out and I didn't have the internal resilience because I'd burned it up trying to grow faster. And so then I would just have to go and chill. So it was like this sort of feast and famine. It was like this cycle, I would just go through this repeatable cycle. And that's when I realized, slow down and stay with this inside sense of calm. And so the way that I personally do that is by noticing the physical symptoms of me starting to speed up internally. And it's things like clenching my jaws. So, I notice I'm clenching my teeth when I go to sleep, trying to drink a lot more coffee, trouble sleeping, those kinds of things. That's a sign that I'm speeding up in the inside. And I just need to be gentle with myself and be present, right? So that's my tip number 5, slow down inside. And the more I slow down inside, the more steady and sustainable the growth is on the outside. So that's tip number 5. All right, tip number 6, clean money only. Clean money only. What does that mean? It means that in order to be a lot of the problems, business is all about relationships. And a lot of the problems come when you enter into relationship with people who probably aren't a great cultural fit, whether that's team members, customers, clients, whatever, partners, all of that. So from my perspective, I've really implemented this policy of clean money only, which means that I'm very focused around our business, around our offers, very disciplined there, because I want to ensure that everything that we do is scalable, right? So really focused on scalable offers that can grow so that I actually want to grow them. Very focused on only working with ideal clients and being completely clear and firm about not working with people in our programs who aren't ideal. So really unselling people and making, doing what we can from our marketing to really help people understand who our programs are for and not for. And then when we talk to people, really seeing those, they're less sales conversations as they are sort of a mutual investigation to make sure we're a fit. And when you're in that state of integrity, it's really powerful. It's just really powerful. It's a really powerful state for you to be in. And your business grows. It's weird. The more you're clear on who you're not for, the more you attract people who are 100% for you. So that's my clean money only policy. And it's huge. And I really suggest that you have one. Okay, and then my tip number 7 is really about having boundaries, strong boundaries. And how do you do that? From my perspective, it's really about, so for instance, I don't work on Fridays. I very rarely work on Fridays, I should say. And I do a lot to stay present. So if something isn't right, I discipline myself to address it and say it. Really cultivating very strong boundaries. And I think when you do that, the boundaries are what create the freedom. So I think you can tell if you've been listening to this show, I really believe that structure creates freedom, and invest a lot of time, energy, and thought into creating the structures that set me free, that provide a great experience for our team and for our clients. So there you have it, 7 tips to run a chill 7-figure business. All right. So I mentioned it earlier in the episode, but if you really are resonating with the type of business that I have been talking about here, that foundation, the place where we get started in this work is in the Power Presence Position Business Accelerator. That is the foundation of a chill 7-figure business. We are helping you create those foundational assets so that you can scale to 7 figures and beyond with a lot of chill in your life. So I suggest you go to powerpresenceposition.com and check it out to really learn more about how we can start that work together. If you're a listener to this podcast and you love it, I strongly encourage you to sign up for my missives. Go to eleanorbeaton.com/join. I email 3 times a week. I personally write those emails. You get all kinds of insights I do not share on the podcast, sneak previews of our content, all of that. So go ahead to eleanorbeaton.com/join. And then the third little tidbit that I want to share with you is I really want to thank you so much for being a fan of this show, for subscribing, for leaving reviews, all of that. We just appreciate it so much. We appreciate the reviews. We appreciate the you taking the time to share it on social, to let people know about the show and all of that good stuff. So really appreciate it. And I wanted to take a moment to highlight a listener of the show. This is Nicole K 1013. She gives us a 5-star review. She says, "This is the most valuable podcast I've ever listened to. Over the past couple of years," she says, as my business has grown, Eleanor's guidance has been pivotal, particularly now that I am scaling. Every podcast episode is masterfully created and jam-packed with amazingness. Her newsletters are on point. So, and then she goes on to say, "The $0 offerings I've taken advantage of have been wildly helpful. If you're like me, you've probably asked yourself how Eleanor and her team could possibly add more value to your business because her content is so dang good. Well, I recently signed up for the Power Presence Position program and it does not disappoint. If you haven't sat in a room with Eleanor herself or the Safi team, you are missing out. The coaching, the workbook, the group book, the group work, the accountability is incredible. I cannot recommend it enough." Thank you so much, Queen. I so appreciate that. That's an awesome review and testimonial from you. I really, really appreciate it. All right, guys, there you have it. If you have time to leave us a review, we would so appreciate it. And come on over and check out the Power Presence Position Business Accelerator at powerpresenceposition.com. Truly, what we get into in this podcast is literally the tip of the iceberg. The work that we do in our programs where it's you and me sitting down and talking through your business, that's where the real transformation happens. And it'd be an honor to work with you if you feel called. All right, take care, everybody. Have a beautiful week. Bye-bye. If you love this show, then you will love even more my missives, i.e. my emails. If you're not on my email list yet, I strongly encourage you to sign up at eleanorbeaton.com/join. Now, when you go and sign up for my email list, you will quickly discover why some of the most popular, well-known, and influential voices in the world of women's entrepreneurship quietly, studiously, consistently open every single email I send out, because they want to be inspired, they want to be entertained, and also I think they really want to connect with a woman like myself who's in full command of her voice and is willing to open up and share her thinking, her ideas, and her story. I promise you that on this email list, you are going to be entertained. You are going to hear really valuable tips about stepping into your power as a leader. And you're also going to get fun insight that I do not share anywhere else. Go to eleanorbeaton.com/join. And I promise you it will be the highlight of your inbox.